sincerely thank Stackroot for giving us this opportunity. And we thank Rajendra Pawar for setting the clear stage for us, especially the topic which we are talking about. It is acronym RSA for all of us to remember: resilient, sustainable, and adaptive architecture. Okay. So you mentioned about all of these 3 points beautifully. You have set the stage for us. Now it's important for us to relate all of those points in our day-to-day life. We sincerely thank you all for taking time to come here. We want to make this really productive. We have a star-studded panel here who've got deep experience. Towards the end of this panel discussion, we open up for questions where we request you to ask the challenges which you are facing on a daily basis, which are relevant to this topic of RSA, which is resilient, sustainable, and adaptive architecture. So make use of this opportunity. So let me start with an anecdotal experience which I went through several years back, about 20 years back when I was living in Japan. I was working in a 33rd floor office. Around 12:30, the entire building started shaking. That was first time for me in Japan. I've never experienced earthquake, and I was shattered. I was about to run, and I looked at all of my colleagues who were sitting around. They were never bothered at all. They were sitting and they were continuing to work. I was astonished, what's happening? So its entire building is shaking, computer is shaking, the entire table is shaking, and nobody is shaken at all. Why? And one of my colleague, who's sitting right next to me, said, just relax, sit down, nothing will happen. I just followed what they said because they know what they are talking, and within a minute, everything was okay. This taught me a deeper lesson in the IT field too, right? What made them not nervous, not shaky in such an environment? They are sitting and continuing to smile and continuing to work only because they have a resilient architecture. They know nothing is going to happen. They are relying on the structure where they're sitting, right? And they're not worried about what's going to happen, right? So this is a clear momentum for us to think about how do we build a resilient architecture, right? So I strongly believe in what Sir Norman Foster said in terms of we are building for the present, having complete awareness of the past, but for the future, which is essentially unknown. And we have gone through multiple such cycles. So today in our discussion, we have started a panel. So we talk about the importance of RSA. So I'll open up for the panel, starting with Utkarsh. Your view in a shorter perspective, and then we will go deeper into the experience evidence so that audience will get benefit out of it. What's your view of RSA? And is it an afterthought in the current case, or is it by design?
I think, first of all, let me start by saying that architectures are not absolute. In isolation, you can never say that, this is a beautiful piece of architecture. I can draw a beautiful looking architecture and say, is it beautiful or not? It doesn't work that way. It is beautiful in a certain context when applied to a domain of problem statement that you're trying to achieve, which means there is a meaningfulness and relevance associated with it. In my parlance, in the last 13 years of my life at Flipkart, we all know about CI/CD. We started coining a new term, CP, continuous platformization. It cannot be a before thought or an afterthought. It has to be a continuous thought, as per me, and that's why continuous platformization is a word that we coined and we practiced. Because when you see that architectures are in the context of a business domain or a problem statement, adaptive, what does it mean to a business? Business is constantly malleating. There are certain economics that are coming into play. It could be the landscape around you. It could be certain emerging technologies that are pushing business to unlock certain new potential. And if your architecture is too constrained, it's not malleable, it's not configurable, right? Then you're constraining business. It cannot be a seamless transition of business from one spectrum to the other. It will be stopgap arrangements, right? And as long as you can ensure ideal state is seamless, that business doesn't see these kind of pauses, that's absolutely ideal, but most likely it will not be. As long as there are non-significant pauses that allow businesses to keep transforming, enabled by technology as a backbone, that to me is adaptive. And resilient would mean that understand the end game that you're playing. There are consumers at the end of it who are experiencing certain offerings. As long as you are staying true to it, which means that you are predictable, the way your business is designed to be, and predictable in a repeatable manner, that there are no exception scenarios that, oh, I missed this scenario, and hence customers will come in and say that, you did not anticipate, but I am seeing something which is a bit of an anomaly. That doesn't work, right? So if you practice all of these in application to the domain around you, that to me is the entire end game, right? Adaptive, resilient in a meaningful way, and business being at the forefront of it. We are the backbone.
Thank you. Nitin?
Sure, yeah. So I think he brought a very important aspect, right? The context in which these architectures have to, evolve or emerge, that's very important. So I think if we take that as a base, then if you look at the adaptive, it's not adaptable, it's adaptive. And we have seen it, right? On your phone, you start typing, and this is already adapted to how you're typing. So it's not far-fetched to think that your architectures are adaptive, right? It's not adaptable, adaptive. And there are so many examples in our business. I mean, I also come from an e-commerce background. Personalization is a fine example of adaptive thing. Local, I mean, you go to Google Map and say, what's near me? Now that's adapting to where you are and what you're trying to do and stuff like that, right? And so it's not far-fetched to think that way. Similarly, in case of resiliency or resilient architectures, more so in the digital era where everybody is thinking about cloud, whether it is on-prem or public, more so in public. And it's not uncommon, in fact, in probably about 2 years ago, some region cloud has crashed twice in a month. It's not uncommon. While if you had said it 20 years ago, they said, no, my mainframe or my systems never crash, right? That's not the case now. So it's a resilient. So for example, I would go to the extent that not even start saying that it's a fail-safe, but it's safe-fail approach, which means you assume that systems will fail and make sure that you take some precautions or take some architectural decisions to make sure that your businesses don't suffer. Sustainability for me is obviously energy sustainability is one of the important things. But in my view, thanks to some of the government of India is already putting together a structure so they can give the carbon credits to other companies, or you can claim and stuff like that. I think it's going to be a competitive advantage. And I know Srini and others, they're working very diligently to ensure that sustainability in terms of your IT landscape, whether it is a devices, mobiles and computers and stuff like that, even in the cloud. And there's a lot of work happening in ML and AI stuff, like, when do we switch off something? When do we switch on something? How do you make your minimal? How do you make yourself maximal? So it's an important aspect for all of us as architects to think about these as essential ingredients and not as an afterthought later. These are like core elements on which you prepare your platform and start thinking about your solutions.
Listening to Rajendra's speech was like a reflection of what all I have learned in the last 30 years. and maybe what I might learn, in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you, Rajendra. So I think the room is full of very accomplished architects, and probably some of you who are budding in here. I would lean towards the latter and just share my thoughts in terms of what is this RSA. I will probably start in the other way around. What makes something adaptive, right? So one is a technology change. None of the popular tech stack that was there 20 years back exists today in its form. Everything has changed. And the business process changed. Walmart is not Walmart. Flipkart is not even the Flipkart that it started with as a book thing, right? Every business changes, and the business process change. And then, in terms of a zero latency, the data complexity and the data explosion happens. Can your architecture survive these things? Can it remain, or is it a rip and rebuild kind of a thing? When it comes to resilient, there are three things. Essentially, it fails, it dies down, can you bring it back, right? Or can you make sure that you can pre-detect and make sure it doesn't fail? So what can fail? Your infrastructure can fail. Mostly a good cloud providers take care of it. Your application components can fail, right? Or your resources can run away, right? Your scalability might be a problem. How do you address these things? In the context of the constraints that you have. See, if there were no constraints, there would not be a need for any architecture, right? And in the context of sustainability, while environmental sustainability is a big thing, a lot of us are far removed from it when we are designing an architecture, right? The sustainability means, is it economics? It is operational. You know, how many team members do you need eventually to maintain it, okay? Does it provide the POPs? Does it provide the exceptions? Does it provide the pre-alerts, right? And also in terms of, can it survive the layers of changes that can invariably happen in here? If that happens, I think you have a good RSA, okay? Maybe in the next iteration, I think we'll get into the details of what might constitute that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Well, everything has been spoken about these three terms that can be spoken about. What I just want to add is, today, we were just talking in the morning, the rate of change, like as Nagaraj was mentioning, everything is changing. And the rate of change, how fast is business or the enterprise able to adapt to the change? And what we are seeing is that the rate is varying. You know, the smaller businesses, which are more agile, are catching up faster, learning to fail faster, and doing things differently more often. Whereas enterprises are hesitant to adopt it fast enough. But what is impacting the enterprise? Like if the enterprise is trying to change, it is having a bigger impact globally than the smaller organizations trying to change faster. Which really means that the technology, the underlying aspects of how the enterprise can change will rely on the architecture that it is built upon. So having an adaptive architecture at an enterprise level will enable the enterprise to adapt to the changing business requirements or business conditions while staying resilient without the fear of something coming down or a loss of business, and being sustainable at the same time, because the scale at which it will grow will definitely have a tremendous impact on the sustainability aspect globally. So that's what I see from that point.
Wonderful points. Just to give, always we as human, we need to ask questions. Normally all of us ask this question, why? Why do we need to build resilient? Why do we need to build sustainable? What's in it? Is there an economics associated with it? What are the numbers, right? So just let me quote a few numbers for our awareness and also to bring more seriousness into this particular topic. There was a survey conducted with the IT director, CIO, CTO's organization. It glaringly reflects the need for the resilient system, the sustainable system. 69% of them responded saying that every day customer service disruption is happening because of non-resilient systems, which they have today, right? 48% of them said it's because of crashes, failures, non-performing systems. So performance, reliability, resilience coming together, right, and impacting their business, right? So you spoke about the zero latency systems. Our trading system probably are one of the closest example for zero latency. Just to give a number, about 30 crore rupees are equivalent of about $4 million will go down if a trading system has a latency of 5 milliseconds. That's the type of disruption we see for a non-resilient, non-performant systems, right? So these are alarming numbers. When I started as an architect, probably I was building systems for happy path, functional systems. Probably we ignored non-functional aspects, and now more and more sustainability aspects. As we heard, sustainability is not just about energy. Of course it is about energy, but not just about it. There are economics around it, right? So every architect needs to have a view of sustainability in their mind when they are designing their systems, also economics, right? So let me go to Utkarsh and ask his experience in terms of key tenets of resilient systems and also the economics around it. Utkarsh.
Boils down to some of the objectives. Like I said, there are business objectives that will always be at the forefront. And then you try and see what are those architectural tenets that will make you achieve those objectives. So it always has to be inverted. Otherwise, you'll be sitting in an AC room and trying to be in a very idealistic scenario and say that let me crack the most beautiful looking algorithm. But if it is not going to be as applicable to the business needs, it's a dumb machine. So for us, it's been multiple such journeys, and the cost and economics has been always at the forefront. We always felt that we were not a cash cow ever, right? So we needed, the business needed to rely on technology to make Flipkart sustainable at scale. Because we were leading the entire landscape evolution, not just within Flipkart, but I think the entire economies around us saved, more so post a big billion day in 2014. So few such examples, right? We started with our own data center, a singular one. Obviously, you would kill us saying that, okay, just surviving out of a single data center, and if that went rogue, then what about the customer experience? But yeah, that's how it was, and we started thriving on top of it, being resilient within a data center and then going beyond. So in 2014, when we started looking at, obviously it was not a great year. We all know that, not the best experience, but we learned very quickly, more so on the resilience part of it. And then we started looking at the cost part of it, right? To be in a public cloud, and we are talking about scalability of X, if it is that kind of a throughput that we are supposed to serve, from X to 25X during Big Billion Day. You cannot hoard your compute, your storage infra for 25X just because there is this Big Billion Day upcoming, right? You need to be pretty elastic. So obviously, naturally, you'll go to the cloud and you'll say that, can we work with you and use you for burstability? But none of the cloud providers will be, ready to say that even for us, economics don't work. We need to prepare our infra for 25X, which means when you're not using it during Big Billion Day, rest of the season, who else will use it? I need to get enough, demand created. So it was not working out. And hence, our architecture needed to save for it. So we started optimizing for compute. We started optimizing for storage. We started understanding there are different workload patterns. There are certain accounting, reporting needs that need spiky infrastructure. We almost thought like a cloud provider. During night time, let me use this infra for something else. During daytime, let me use the infra for running the business. And we also started thinking about many other business construct that, there is a deal of the day, which is like a mini BBT during a 24-hour period. So using those constructs, and we worked very closely with our private cloud providers and say that, where do we need to insert 10G cards? Where do we need to insert 1G, 3G? So it was not a homogeneous network design. right? Cataloging kind of system, which a huge payload, images, and everything that you see very enriched in a product page before you buy is a lot of data. If every click is passing on that payload, right, I need fat network pipes. So for us as an architect, we did not just restrict ourselves to being application architects. We went down to the infra level and said that this is how application needs to behave. Let me not make it a black hole that there is this infra and there is us. We made it a blended end-to-end architecture. So yeah, I think it all comes down to understanding the end-to-end objective and removing some of these hard boundaries, right from front end to back end to infra. We cut through the rank, and in a way, it truly is a full stack architect in a way.
So the key point which I want to extract from this is, as an architect, we need to be aware of the business need. We are building architecture for the business requirements, business constraints, dependencies. That's an extremely important element. Second, as an architect, I can't just remain that, no, I am just an application architect. I'm just an integration architect. As you are evolving and growing, you need to look from the holistic perspective. That's where Utkarsh called it as full stack. So end-to-end, infrastructure, application, data, right? All of that. Now, we are talking about cloud, we are talking about edge, distributed cloud systems, right? So we'll get into those details. During the day today, we hear about all of this, right? Please make use of this opportunity to probe into more details and ask questions and extract information, right? Nathan.
So, many of us here are architects, or at least from the engineering side of business, right? We are always faced with two difficulties. Number one, we as architects, we love NFRs, right? Because that's where we try to look on some cool stuff to work on, something which you take pride in working. But you may have noticed that the business and the product owners, I hope there are not many product owners here, they care for functionality, feature. What are you adding to the customer, right? I mean, obviously the NFRs don't necessarily directly add, in a very, if you just take a very top level view, which is not the case, I'm going to show that. That's number one. So the important aspect is all the NFRs, and you asked the question, is it an afterthought or things like that, right? To answer that, I think as an architect, our endeavor should be to convert these NFR requirements into business terms, and that's something which takes time, but it's not impossible to do. I'll take you very simple example. Walmart makes about $600 billion in a year, right? On an average, 1 to 2 billion per day. If your system is down for a day, you're talking about cool $2 billion of revenue loss. And of course, a lot of accompanying things, you will lose customers and this and that. So the moment we were able to put a tag and articulate these requirements into something which business and product understands, your life will be far, far easier. Right? Now you can take something very similar. Same is with the COVID has taught us many things. As an architect, you strive to see, I have taken care of many things, but obviously it's not going to cater to anything, right? There's a different from any. Having said that, many businesses, I know Flipkart has done it, Amazon did it, Walmart did it. Whatever we used to carry in the shelf, whether it's a supply chain behind that, shelf behind that, completely changed within a week. You will see only the paper towels and whatnot, right? And as opposed to what you used to see. What would have taken us about maybe 3 to 4 months, people were able to deliver it in a week's time, or maybe one sprint, 2 weeks' time, end to end, you can say. Now, businesses saw this, right? So, for example, when I'm trying to say that I'm working on some tech debt and do that, I'm actually not saying that. I'm saying that is what is internal to architects and all that. What I'm really giving ability for businesses to say that if you need to change a few perspectives, context, whether it is supply chain things to do and all that, I'm going to do that at least some 5 use cases in cool 1 to 2 weeks or 2 sprints. I think that's when we architects will be able to convince our business and product counterparts that these are not afterthoughts. These are not something good to have, but something which is foundational. And if the moment you convert these requirements into business language they understand, life will be much, much smoother. And I've had many successes the moment I was able to turn it around like that. Yeah.
RSA is not an afterthought. It is fundamental to what we
And
build
it's
and
not just
achieve.
the architect who do it. It is impacting business, it's impacting customers, product. I think that's the reality, and we need to bring that up as architects. Using data, of course. Using a lot of data and analytics, you can prove that point.
Yeah. You're leading to Nagaraj's expertise now. He brings in enormous expertise in the data space, in the analytics space, how it plays a key role in all of these three key pillars which we spoke about architecture. Nagaraj.
Thank you, Gopi. One of my colleagues, whom I respect a lot, says, data is like Hanuman. Data is Chiranjeevi. It doesn't go away.
Nagaraj.
So, data exists. The data that existed in the 1980s for a transaction is the same as the data that exists today for that particular transaction. And even for today's transaction, we may have some more additional elements. So architect so that the data translates into a useful information for a business. How does this translation happens from data to a useful information for the business? So data has to be seen in the context of a business process, right? Rajendra mentioned about dimensions of an architecture. There is a dimensions of a business, okay? There are several steps of a flow that happens. And at every step, there is an action, there is an interaction, and there is a reaction, right? Okay? Minimize the flows, maximize the interactions, design for the data so that when your layer changes, your solution, your architecture survives and it can thrive. That is what is important. So, in memory is not an architecture. Everything is in memory today. Go back 5 years, it was a very big deal. I'm an in-memory architect. Go back 10 years, I'm a Hadoop architect. Very few people talk about it. And 90% of the organization that deployed Hadoop never needed it. Today, a lot of people are a Snowflake architects. We don't know whether it will exist in its form or not. Okay, or everything will become like a Snowflake. But your data and information flows will always exist. And this business dimensionality that translates data into information, it enables a conversation and a collaboration between an IT and a business. When you do that, you are starting to do the data-driven architecture. I will take 2 examples. One something we did very recently, and one something I did early in my career, what gave me an architectural mindset. Okay. So we got a proposal. One of my ex-CEOs bought a project saying, hey, we need to deploy a fraud detection solution for a telecom company in Europe. This is very important. I know the people. If I say yes, they will give it to you. Can you execute? It seemed very scary and very complicated. Then we had some discussions. We had one of our advisors called Vijayan. He said, okay, let us distill this down. What exactly it needs? What it needed was an ability to intake about 500,000 protocol records every second, 500,000 protocol records every second. And then determine if there is any anomaly, and then do everything else that is required to flag a potential fraud that happens, okay? The typical response was, oh, it is very simple. Throw a Kafka here, throw a Spark here, throw this. We said, okay, this is cost, and some of the tools that were available, it was coming to like more than $1 million. All we had was about a $300K budget. How do we do this? So our team said, if we can drink in a serial uniphase 500K records in a second, we are done. Okay, we just need to design that. And what is it meant for? Is it likely to change? If it changes, can we reconfigure it? It is unlikely that the telecom protocols change, but in case it changes, can we reconfigure those things? Can we make it parameterized? And we don't need to store all of this. We just need the anomaly parts, right? how do we do this? So compared to an infrastructure that would have taken, 8 to 10 different software components and 10 plus different servers, eventually this system that drank these 500,000 protocols records was running on a system with less than 8 GB of RAM. It could have been running on any of our laptops, right? And it shrunk the potential fraud detection time from the telecom company for about 2+ weeks to less than 5 to 10 minutes, okay? We had accomplished the sustainability of our economics, sustainability of our operational team. If we had a traditional industry recommended thing, we would have had 4 or 5 people just to maintain each of the components in here, in this context, right? And we had made it completely data driven. If the protocols change tomorrow, we could reconfigure it, will start billing. There was also a question of what if it fails? What if it fails? We keep dumping the stuff into certain folder, we drink from it, and if the system is absolutely dead, we restart a new system and take it from there, and we are up on the 11th minute. So that is an architectural mindset. It came from a constraints. The constraint of how much data that we had to drink, the constraint of how much money we had, the constraint of how much money we were willing to spend on being able to maintain. And we accepted the project after we said, okay, we can manage this, without burning whole. Let me step back, way back to the 1990s. This was a time when the trading systems were not in place. This was part of an NSE system. We had gotten state-of-the-art, TCS has gotten the state-of-the-art system from a New York Stock Exchange, and they had deployed it. Everybody was learning the system. And I was a rookie. I had 6 months experience. I was in a project. I was very unhappy that I didn't get to work on IBM systems, which was very hot at that point of time. And there was a front end and a back end. I was on a back end, and I was again unhappy for it. And a guy came who was a lead on the project and said, Nagraj, what you are handling is very, very important. It is like a railway junction system. In a modern parlance, it was a combination of a web server, app server kind of a thing. He said, you are looking at that control room. You know what? I need you to open every program and put this log file here. I said, man, I'm going to be typing for the next 6 months. I was very, very unhappy. He looked at me and said, Nagraj, you do this. You will learn a lot. I really didn't want to do it, but I saw in his eyes, and he had so much of a conviction and clarity, said, I must trust this guy. I must trust this guy. 6 months down the line, we were able to build up many things. Is there a build-up of a brokerage orders that are not getting executed? Is there any mismatch of a order execution that is happening? All those things could easily be detected, okay? The only reason it could happen and we could build some layers on top of the original system was we had built the observability on top of that. Okay, that was very, very important. And all that happened because we had enabled some mundane job of capturing in the logs what is relevant. Very mundane job of reconciliation. One thing that I want to call out for the budding architects here is the mundane things are extremely important, okay? Extremely important. You have read the book by the famous doctor who says the procedures are important. I'm not able to recall the famous book, but he says there is a procedure. You count the number of scissors, you count the number of cotton bands, everything you do, that's very important. What is very, very hot, most likely will become very cold in the 3 months' time, but your mundane things will remember, okay? So count on a data, make sure it is Hanuman, and make sure that they adopt and in sync with your business processes.
Thank you. Suddenly we are made to adapt. 5 minutes is reduced, right? So now we need to adapt, right? Hemant, quickly on the shift left part and the automation part, which is going to help.
In fact, just a quick aspect on all the things that were spoken. The underlying thing is your ability to stitch them together, ability to run this through automation. Because the faster and the better it is automated, the backbone that Utkarsh talked about is an automated system. The automated system that can help you guide through the whole process, that help you adapt. So that's the basic thing that needs to happen in an enterprise or in an organization, in a business, that will drive this. So I think I want to keep it short, but try and automate whatever you can through this whole architectural process to get the best results in the shortest possible time.
Beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen. So now we'll open up for 2 or 3 questions. Anyone? Yes, sir. Beautiful question. So, anyone would like to take? Utkarsh?
Which are very, very explicit, total cost of operations running the business, those you can easily derive, that what is the cost that is incurred by tech, infra, and so on. But there are few hidden elements that we should also be cognizant about. Sustainability is also about, how much resource is going into it, right? Because you have finite resource. There are, let's say 100 engineers working across all objectives. How much of it goes into the platformization and so on, and which is so-called non-core for the business, right? Core for us, but non-core for the business. So if you start dissecting all of it, and also the kind of skill set that are required and the cost at which they bring to the table, I think those are things that are definitely quantifiable.
Carbon footprint is one more thing, and the most practical things we have done is mostly to do with how do I reduce the cost of operations, and he alluded to that, and that will be part of that scope 1 of the carbon footprint, this thing, scope 1, 2, 3. Scope 1 is what you own, and IT is the right thing for us to go about. That would be probably the most tangible when it comes to the architecture. And we have some folks in the audience. Trini, he runs a company on sustainability, so probably you should catch up with him and do that, yeah.
The key point to remember in the sustainability, adopting the sustainability into the architecture, is to look at the fact that from starting the coding element, there are, and the operating systems you deal with, how you deploy it into your environment, there are sustainability measures which you can take, right? So when you start applying those, then you can put a measurement criteria. Otherwise, it will just be an afterthought, in my view, right? But it's good thing is that in every area, you have a sustainable code development, sustainable operating system, sustainable infrastructure, which resonates from the IT part. One other part which is important from a sustainability perspective is to understand your business, right? How your business is looking at carbon footprint reduction, looking at energy reduction. It could be in the utility space, it could be in the travel space, it could be in the banking space. Everywhere there is a need for sustainability from business perspective. Bring that into your architecture. It's not just about technology and energy saving within the architecture technology element, in my view. Any other question, please? Yes, sir. We can take 2. Yes, yours.
Hi, so my name is Vijay. I work at DXC. So my question is around, and that question actually keeps coming to my mind. I mean, I've been in industry for 27 years now, and just these kind of things keep coming, because you all come from the both business side as well as from the technology side of experiences. Are we, like when we say being adaptive, right? Are we being too fast on the technology adoption? Because becoming like, are we giving enough time for the business to react it? I'll give you a simple example. I was having the same discussions sometimes back in the street as well on this one. We started with like a data center with a physical world, then we moved to virtual, then we moved to managed virtual, and then to the cloud, and then to the microservices, and then moved on and on. Now, the journey was pretty seamless to some extent, but of late, there is an agility which actually make it to grow too fast. Are we giving enough time for business to react it? Because business has to spend money to get to that technology. Which is the driver here? Is the business who is actually driving the technology? Is the technology which is driving the business? So we, somewhere I would like to hear this kind of a feedback from you. What is the main which is like, getting it to, I mean, somewhere for the technological world or like for architect, we make it as a pride. We know this technology, we are working on AI, MLs, we are working on IoTs and all. Is it really pride or is it really giving a value or not? I'm not denying the fact that these definitely are the technology needs, but we need to see that how this is really benefiting to the business. So I just want to hear from your side. Thank you.
Yes,
You want?
technology obviously is very, very aggressively changing the landscape around us. If we believe that we are not agile, we need to be agile. I think it's time now for us to up the game. And it is about those finite balances that we stick around us, right? And it works both ways. I would believe that there are certain areas where business will be the driver, saying that this unlocks something new for me, and they will be the first one to lead it. But in many ways, because of the innovations that are happening around us, technology should also lead the race and say that there is a bottom-up, unlocking potential that is coming through. Architects should speak up, saying that if we absorb or imbibe this technology, then this is how business will change. Absolutely distinct advantages, right? So it has to work in both ways. Agility, you have to crack it. The way I see it is, there is a layer to it. The culture of experimenting, growth hacking should be fundamental to every one of us. It doesn't take a lot of your time. 1% of your time, you can just explore, exploit, and say, okay, is this technology meaningful? Some quick hacks and so on. Be very meaningfully relevant around it. Second would be, if you start seeing any traction around it, that this POC worked well, then you need to activate certain part of your machinery that in a very guarded way, can I start impacting meaningfully some part of a business line where this technology comes in the fore. So a lab, R&D, growth hacking setup paired with a deeper, impactful, meaningful solution which embraces technology, these need to work in tandem.
This is where composable architecture matters, right? So yeah, how adaptive and flexible is your architecture from a business and technology perspective matters, right? So this is where the loosely coupled, tightly coupled architecture is not just English, but in reality, this is how it has to work. It looks like we are out of time. I know you have multiple people have questions, but we're happy to take it outside and answer all of your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.